There are 8 billion humans on Earth. The Space Force Association is bringing over 2,000 of them together, all with the common goal of preserving and protecting our thriving space domain. The most critical space power challenges will be addressed. This is your invitation to be part of the solution. Attend the Space Power Conference and help secure our nation's legacy in the stars.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Space Warfighter Talks, hosted by the Space Force Association. I'm Greg Gillinger, the Chief Intelligence Officer for the Space Force Association, as well as the creator of the Frontier Flash newsletter. And today we're continuing on with our series of interviews with senior intelligence professionals within the Space Force. And I'm super excited today to have Colonel Col Bell on from the Space Training and Readiness Command, STARCOM. Chris is the lead intelligence officer for Star Command, and we're so excited to have him with us today to kind of explain the mission of STARCOM, intelligence roles in it, and some of the challenges that that organization is facing. So good morning, Chris, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about STARCOM's mission and the role of intelligence in meeting that mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I take it down to let's start with basics, right? You know, our mission statement, right? Increase Space Force readiness to prevail in competition and conflict through education, training, doctrine, and test. Right. That kind of gives you the broad brush of the major kind of core areas, right? We want to write the doctrine that sets us up on a solid foundation. We need to build the infrastructure so that we can test and evaluate new emerging systems, so that we can also confirm the readiness of crews, so that ultimately we're making Guardians better. We are allowing them to have confidence in the systems they use and confidence in their own abilities, so that whatever future lies ahead, they're ready for it. Now that's kind of the long-winded mission statement. The one that came out kind of earlier this month from the CSO, General Saltzman. And I don't know what the commander is going to do with ours, but the CSOs, I like it because I can remember it a lot easier, and it's very, very simple to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. And for me, as the intel guy down here at STARCOM, that makes it easy because all I have to do from there is just add the words integrate intelligence that prepares Guardians to, and then put what the CSO did after, and I'm like, cool, I got it, right? My job is to make sure that as we are building doctrine, as we are identifying weapons and tactics and tactical improvements, as we are building curriculum, training materials, the range of the future, that everything that we do is threat informed, right? So we are not doing it in a vacuum. We're not doing it based on one person's priorities, that it's really centric to what our other competitors in space are doing now, but really, because I have a little bit of a background in training, and I know that if I wanted to build a new course, it would take months on the good side, right? If it's 6 months course, it might take me a year to develop, but if it's just 1 or 2 months, right, I got to get the funding, I got to work with the customers, the consumers to scope out the requirements. Then I got to start doing my research and building. So, from course need identification to having a course ready, let's make it easy and just say it's a year. And then I got to train the instructors, and I got to validate it, and I got to run the students through it who are coming from everywhere. So, when I look at training timelines, I'm thinking 2, 3, 4 years potentially to get the effects of that training in place. If I'm building doctrine, right, good doctrine isn't built overnight. It's not built by one person. And especially if you're looking to build a cyber training range or any other hardware-based training range, all these things take years. And if we do it right, we're not based on what any other nation state actor is doing right now. We should be basing it on what we believe and what we assess they're going to do in the future. So that means, yeah, we over in Starcom, we have to be forward-leaning and forward-looking. We have to focus on where is country X going to be in 3 years or 5 years, and more importantly, where do we want U.S. Space Force to be in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years? Because we need to start doing that work now, essentially.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that.
And I will say also, yeah, and at the same time, especially if I'm talking weapons and tactics, I can't forget what they are doing now, because that's kind of a little bit of a shorter timeline. And so, I can use weapons and tactics to kind of bridge us as we're building longer term formal training and acquiring new systems and evaluating them.
No, as you were talking there, I was reminded of General Whiting and some of his comments when you were working together, and how intelligence needs to drive operations. And it's great to see certainly that intelligence also needs to help drive training as well. And it seems like that's really top of mind for you and your organization there. You mentioned a little bit about your background. I think you've been a little bit modest in saying you had a little bit of background in training and tactics developments and doctrine and whatnot. Can you give us a little bit more about kind of where you've been and what kind of prepared you for your current position as a senior intelligence officer there at Starcom?
Absolutely. So 25 years in uniform now. I didn't start out as an intel guy. And so I still have to remind myself that I am one sometimes, even though I've been doing it for more than 20 years. So coming out of college at Texas A&M, easy to feel like, like the last kid picked for dodgeball. I was bounced, and I don't even know if you know this. So I was bounced from 2 different career fields before I even left College Station. Because they kept looking at my eyesight and my eyeballs, and they kept saying like, oh, gee, recoil and horror and fear at how bad this guy's vision was. So I, not going to be a combat system operator. And then eventually I knew it was really bad when they said, you can't even be a missile operator and sit in a dark hole in the ground. So literally, right as we're about to graduate, right as I'm graduating, moved into our first department and all that good stuff. They said, well, what else can he do? He's kind of an engineer, and he's got acquisitions management on his, list of 10 career fields that he'd like to do. So we got one of those open slots, we'll send him over there. So I started out as an acquisitions manager, and literally in the very last job they had available, which was at Edwards. And Edwards doesn't really have, in the Mojave Desert, doesn't really have much of an acquisitions mission. So I kind of floundered for a while, and then, as luck would have it, I was doing a tour of the F-15 squadron, and test pilot squadrons are great because they're really small. The pilots are all super experienced, and there's some of the smartest people you'll ever encounter. And the squadron commander wanted youth, he wanted energy, and he thought I had that. So he offered me an opportunity, and I jumped at it. So without really being qualified or trained, I started jumping into F-15 and T-38 test project management. So I think the first assignment for anyone is super important. And it's, I love any time we get to work with our youngest people, the first termers, because this is your chance to set them on the right course. And I had a lot of folks do that for me, right? I had really great mentors. They were all at least 10 years older than me. Most of them went on to make 06 or GO. And I learned from them, right? If you can invest just a little bit of time in your folks, the younger ones, it'll pay off exponentially. Had a chance, anytime you're doing test projects, all the jets are completely unique and different. And literally none of them are alike. If you break one, you got to jump through fiery hoops to get the next one running. And as the gold bar lieutenant going into the senior master sergeant Prode Super's office on a Thursday saying, hey, could you please swap the engines out because I got pop-up range time for a test on Friday. You have to learn that life is give and take. And that was a big thing I learned from those guys. Something as stupid and easy as being snacko and doing the job that no one else wants. But I think the big thing from being in a world with, and this kind of sets the trend of being in a room with people that were both, for then a lot older than me, and then later down the road, a lot more technically proficient and also a lot smarter than I was. You learn how to get comfortable with that, right? You kind of learn what your value is, what you bring to the table. And later on, when you become the oldest person in the room, you learn to draw out the younger folks, right, to make them part of the conversations, because they're going to have great insights that we don't have. So, kind of the tools that I use the most now are ones I learned before I ever became an Intel person. But as luck would have it, getting that taste of the operational side of the Air Force was addictive, and I wanted more of it. So they opened up. We had, at that point, we had cross-flow boards, and I think there were 17 people from the acquisitions community that wanted to leave and do something else, and they limited it to one. So I was the one that they wanted to get rid of. So jumped over to Intel, graduated from Goodfellow in 2002. And it's been hilarity from there. It's been an amazing adventure. Started with the AWACS up in Alaska. Was fortunate enough to get to and somehow graduate from the U.S. Air Force Weapons School. And then from there, a couple of years doing rescue. And I started to build this both depth and breadth of experience, right? And so the first couple of years were all about tactical operations and all about operational integration. The Air Force sent me to school with the Army for a year at Fort Leavenworth at the Command and General Staff College. And then after that point, the powers that be decided, okay, now let's really work on this breadth thing. And they started flipping me between cyber and signals intelligence jobs for almost the next decade. Had a chance to work for you as a squadron operations officer for cyber tactics development. Also commanded a cyber squadron. So the Air Force's the 39th Information Operations Squadron, the Air Force's cyber operations schoolhouse, where we did initial qualification training in Michigan. Well, no, we did just initial qualification training for both cyber and info ops, which was just, I don't think that a better job exists, frankly. A chance to integrate or interact with really seasoned instructors, best of class, super technical experts, and then you're bringing in 1,000 students a year and having that kind of payoff impact. So after doing that and kind of going back and forth, eventually ended up at the Naval War College, which was significant. Number one, because that's when I really figured out that the Air Force liked me. I just, I don't know that they liked me around them. They liked me better at a distance. But that's where I kind of, the first questions about space came up, right? I had a few people reach out to me and ask, well, what do you think about space? And I think, over the preceding 19, 20 years, I developed a little bit of reputation as being a technical guy, being someone who could plug and play to a wide variety of different kind of missions, and wasn't too intimidated about it. Inside, I might have this, voice of terror going, like, what are you doing? You don't deserve to be here. But you just have to get over it. And you have to, embrace being uncomfortable, and understand that, there are people that are going to know more than you. However, breadth and depth and different types of experience, if you can bring a different kind of thinking, a different kind of problem solving to the table, you're value added. In fact, I think that diversity of thought and an experience is really what I value about the Intel career field, because you can build that up over years and years. And the more we can kind of teach our young people to be intellectually curious, to not be intimidated by anything when math gets involved, that's what we're looking for. But so yeah, the short summary to the very long-winded answer is it's just one day at a time. You take one job, you do the best you can from it, you learn from it, and then you apply those to the next one. I personally found it feels like every job I go to, I kind of I balance it 50-50 more or less. About half of what I apply is based on what I've learned. And then the other half is I leave myself open to new experiences and trying to, try and always add to the toolkit down the road. And of course, I'll say, for anyone, this is not an easy life that we've chosen. In my case, I think it's been 15 moves in 25 years. And so you don't continually progress. You don't get new opportunities unless you've got, mentors and leaders looking out for you. people that are willing to speak on your behalf, people that are willing to give you chances, and ultimately, at least in my case, kind of the team Bell back home, the family that's willing to let me play and keep doing this.
Thanks for that rundown, Chris, and congratulations on everything you've accomplished. And it occurs to me you're on your third straight space assignment now, right?
I am. Yeah.
And that's going to become more and more common as we get down the road here with U.S. Space Force, right? So that's one of the things I'm really anticipating and looking forward to, seeing what Guardians are able to accomplish when they're able to actually stay in space for multiple assignments in a row.
So
I think folks might be curious as to, what does a typical day look like for you as the senior intel officer at Starcom?
and I just kind of glossed over the two other space assignments I had, and I'll fix that real fast. I remember going like first week in the job at Vandenberg, and I've got a little bit of overlap with my predecessor. You may have met him before.
Lots to clean up.
And he's throwing out all these words, and I'm going in my head, it's like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I mean, just all these threats, all these, every system you can think of, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, my notebook is getting very full very fast, but you learn it, and that is what's exciting for the young Guardians on the intel side, is they'll still have breadth of education or breadth of information and experience. But the depth that they're going to get over even if it's just 5 years, right? But if it's 5 or 10 or 20 years, it's really fascinating to watch. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, so current day in the life right now. So I'll say first of all that I am the director of intelligence, but I also have a couple other hats that I wear as well. So within Starcom, we have taken intelligence, space operations, and cyber, and we've merged them together, right? So we don't have strictly a 2 or strictly a 3, we have a 2-3, and that breaks down to several divisions. And so of those 3 core functions, we have an 06 that governs each at the directorate level. So, I'm the intel one, that's easy, but I also have a space operations counterpart and have a cyber operations counterpart. And that's great because we can make sure that those 3 focal areas are integrated into everything we do across the operations directorate, or the Intel and Operations Directorate. So even though I primarily focus on intelligence and then also weapons and tactics, because I've got a weapons and tactics background, and then also I'll focus on doctrine, exercises, and wargaming. We have education and training. We've got the range division. Also test and operational integration. I will jump into those lanes as they need me to, or as there's anything that I can do to make sure the intel is integrated throughout. And that's really good because I don't have to go from one directorate to another and kind of ask for or demand for intel to be put into training. I can just kind of work within the system, and I can make sure that as we're doing any new effort, that it is threat informed and we have intel baked into it. So what that means for the daily life, I'll say that, and I saw General Gagnon's interview, and I like to approach it the way that he does, where he starts his day getting smart and reading, and then he focuses for a little bit on operation and what's happening right now, and he carves out dedicated time to be the investment maker and look to the future. And I think those are the 3 things that we have to do, right? I have to stay cognizant and knowledgeable on what's happening in the world and what's going to happen in the future. There's always the crisis of the whatever's happening for that day. I won't say crisis, but just the daily operations. And then we want to make sure that we are, and it's a struggle for every job you go into, is balancing the urgent and the important. And you can't do one at the full expense of the other. They have to both get done. And so I just, I try and navigate the way to do that. One thing that is, and we expect this going in, right? When you build either a space combatant command, or if you build a space service, that, it's hard work. It's building, and this isn't happening overnight. it takes nothing but a couple, emails and a few signatures to establish a unit, but actually build the unit, to grow it out, to build the buildings takes time. And so I spend a lot of my time just interacting with people, if that's, over the phone or in person, driving all over town. So, if I like to structure my day as I'm going to start normally and just read and then do stuff and then think about stuff, sometimes I don't get to do it exactly that way. It might have to be, this is my day to do X. I'm going to use the next day to look to the future, and then I'll pick a day where there's fewer meetings going on, and I'm just going to get as smart as I can and just talk to people. But I think those three core the three core kind of disciplines in terms of how to structure a day, that works.
Well, thanks for that rundown. Just out of curiosity, how many intelligence personnel are actually part of Star Command, either at the headquarters or throughout the command?
So you asked that question, and I can't help but going back to like the early '90s Desert Storm area Saturday Night Live skit. I think it's like Chris Farley is up there as Schwarzkopf, and the Iraqi journalist pops up and says, something to the effect of, where are your troops, and can I go there and count them? I think so. The short answer is not as many as we're going to have in the future, right? We're certainly in the dozens now. It's to the point where if I look at it in terms of effects, we've got Intel folks embedded to every single one of our 5 deltas, and almost every one of the squadrons as well. So and of course we still got more to get, right? As we, going back to the last question, right? The reason we have to look to the future is, in a new startup, a new service, it's all about investments. And you've got a million things you want to do, and in a certain sense, it's like being a kid at an all candy buffet, right? Like, where do I start now? And so, we work with our functional leadership and work with commanders to figure out the right places to put the right people. Because it's not just about having a manpower billet here and then finding someone who can, who is technically capable, like, oh, you're an Intel person, come here and go do this, right? We want to find the right person for the right job. And obviously, no, you don't want to spend 3 years doing that. But you want to kind of look at, okay, who's going to move in the next year, who's suited for different roles, and start to put them up there. And plus, at the staff level higher than us, they're looking for balancing, how do we build out the training and readiness enterprise versus operational versus scientific and technical intelligence. And so, we're working with them to do that. And so we know that yes, we have enough people right now that I've got full confidence. And I tell the commander, yes, sir, we've got full confidence to do everything that we need to do. And we've got an outlook for the future where we're going to continue to onboard new people with the right experience to set us up kind of on the right course. In terms of what they do, it's all about intelligence driving operations. So I'll break it out, kind of first at the squadron and delta level, right? That's where my heart lives, because that's what I grew up doing. They are integrating Intel into what we're doing, right? That might be building a new lesson, that might be helping to draft SDP 2.0, or designing threat scenarios, or designing the overall flow of a space flag exercise. You name it, right? They are, this is where we've got the E5s, E6s, the lieutenants and captains that are shoulder to shoulder with their operator counterparts, their space operations counterparts, and they are solving the hard problems and looking to what's happening kind of every single day. At the staff level, it might be a little bit less glamorous because our job is to build the enterprise, right? It's to identify what our requirements are, why they exist, how we're gonna connect those threads together. I'm focused on making sure that the folks at the squadrons and the deltas have the infrastructure they need, whether that's systems or tailored facilities, whatever it is that they need to do the job and access the materials that they need, that they require. That's my highest priority, right? Support them so that they can do the real work. And then, of course, we are a training and readiness command, so there's a lot of courseware management. We are rapidly expanding on the space-centric initial skills that we give across the board. So the 13S, the 14N, 17 community. So we are focused very strongly on institutional training, foundational training, and then other training requirements that they'll need at the same time at different points in their careers for skills top-offs or advanced level focus areas. And so literally managing those courses, right? The TDY budgets, the throughput rates to make sure that, we are building exactly what is needed when it's needed. So, I don't know that everyone ever says, I want to grow up and be a staff officer. However, it's where we can have tremendous impact on the future to help guide those resourcing decisions, to help guide what is ultimately the future state of the command and the service.
Thanks, Chris. And you mentioned the recent release of Space Doctrine Publication 2 Tag 0. I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about that document, what it's supposed to do, and how it came to be.
Yeah. So I've read a lot of doctrine in my life, most of it on the joint side, right? Because I've done a lot of joint operations, especially if you're deployed. That's all about joint operations. I did not have a great track record of reading Air Force doctrine. I'd crack the book every once in a while, know where to find it, but read cover to cover, not my strong suit. And I think a lot of Air Force people would say the same. This one I did read cover to cover. And in that, I think, is where we're trying to get, right? If you compare across the services, I don't think you have to look to a better example than the Marines when it comes to, right, they have just the right amount, right? It's kind of the Goldilocks and the Three Bears approach, right? It's, it's not sparse, but it's not so much that they can't understand it or they can't just take the time to go through it. Every Marine knows it. And it's not just the intel person knows the intel doctrine, but no, a Marine knows how they're going to integrate fires, how they're going to do intelligence. That's ultimately what we're looking for, is having the right amount of doctrine so that, Guardians understand it and they can apply it. They understand where they fit into the intel cycle and also how intel supports them. So 2.0 is that keystone level of doctrine. It falls just below kind of the space capstone, which basically says really why we have a space service and what it does. And so right at that keystone level, you've got manpower, operations, essentially kind of the core functions. The next one I believe that we're going to do is say command and control, but I think it's really going to be closer to mission command, right? How we actually orchestrate the forces and how commanders communicate what we're doing. But specifically for 2.0, the big thing that, I think the question we ask ourselves is timing. For the first, for now, for the last couple of years that the Space Force has been in existence, and then for the foreseeable future, for at least the next 5 years, right? You can snap a chalkline at any point and say, okay, now I'm going to do the doctrine, and it's going to have a very short shelf life because we're changing and evolving and growing and building so fast. I mean, it is truly impressive to watch. But why did we do it now, knowing that it's gonna like the day it's published, we're gonna go back and say like, oh, you missed that. This has changed already, and that's just a fact of life. So I think you approach it with the mindset of I'm gonna do it for right now, and I understand that maybe in a year or two I have to revisit it to make some edits and some adjustments, and that's all good. And I think the reason we did it that way, and the reason it's smart to do it that way, is with the exception of a couple officers, lieutenants that were commissioned this year, and a couple young enlisted guardians that just left basic training, like we're all ISTs, we're all inter-service transfers. And if I make assumptions as a former Air Force officer, there's a good risk that a former Army or a former soldier or a former Marine is going to interpret things differently, or they're going to be artificially limited because they don't know something that I take as intuitive. So we have to set a baseline of what we do, why we do it, where it's valuable. And I'll say that, building doctrine for space is challenging, especially when we want to talk about, potential future operations, because we've never fought a war in space. Every other ounce of doctrine out there is based on lessons learned. And the types of lessons we have to learn are peacetime lessons. And so, getting that first salvo out there, allows us to set, kind of a level setting for all the Guardians that we have, so we all understand the basics. It's not going to make anyone an expert by any means, but it does. I'll tell you right now, I wish I had something of that line a couple of years ago. MASINT is my example, right? Measurements and signature intelligence. That's of all the N's, as I look at, SIGINT, geospatial, signals, human. That's the one that I've spent 20 years trying to wrap my head around, because it's not really based on a single sensor. It's not really literal. It involves math and science and physics, and but they spend a couple pages breaking out what it is, where it comes from, the different kind of data that underpins mass. And they do all of this at the unclassed level, right? Straight up releasable. This is just, how we work. And, it would have saved me a lot of Googling and searching and thinking if I just had something a couple of years ago that drew it out so simply. And so it's a great document. It's 41 pages from start to finish. So it's not too hard for anyone to read. You sit through it, and depending on how much you want to scan and think about it, you can spend 30 minutes or 3 hours on it. And that's exactly what we're looking for right now. Now, below those keystones, we do have operational, for example, space domain awareness, and we also have tactical employment doctrine. The old Air Force 3-1s is the closest parallel. And so that does and will get down to, this is exactly what the system does. This is how it operates. These are the lessons learned and the tactical improvements that we've figured out over the years of how to optimally refine and use this system. And the great thing about doctrine is, if you don't follow it, and there's a reason you don't follow it, right, based on your situation, you're not getting suited for an orange jumpsuit and carted off to jail, right? Doctrine is authoritative but not directive. It is used to inform our operators so that as they do anything new, they've got something to lean on, something that provides a level of guidance of, hey, these are the things that you need to think about and be aware of. So I'm excited for it. I can't believe I don't know that I would have said that a couple of years ago.
No, thanks. And you mentioned your previous job. I did want to touch on that briefly. This time last year, you were the commander of the Joint Intelligence Operations Center for U.S. Space Command. Can you touch a little bit about that organization and kind of its mission as well, and your role in it?
Yeah, so a JIOC, a Joint Intelligence Operations Center, every single combatant command has one, and they're all completely different. Both in terms of how they're manned, how many people they've got, and then how they're organized. And so I had the opportunity to be the first one for U.S. Space Command. I think Spacecom was about 2 years old when I got there. And so the way we structured it, and first the big thing is we all work for the commander, and really we all work for the J2. So the Director of Intelligence kind of sets the boundaries and the guidance for the intel enterprise within the command, and I was also the person that is looking kind of outward for how we integrate with the broader intel community and the space intel enterprise. So, but within the Spacecom JIOC, we generally organized, and I put all the operational stuff under the JIOC. And my counterpart was the Chief of Staff. So the way we communicated was, I got the fun stuff, and he got all the manpower and money and everything else. So we had analysis, collections management, current operations, right, a 24/7 watch, targeting, intelligence planning, training and exercises, systems integration, and geospatial intelligence operations, which is kind of all the same other stuff, but just with a geospatial bent, right, between the collections and analysis. So that whole kit, right, you're talking, and of course we grew over time, we almost doubled in size. But if you can take a couple hundred intel folks and harness them to all go after the same things, or get them rolling in the same direction, that is powerful, and that's really exciting. As a commander, right, the first job is to take care of the people, right? Get the people, train them up, get them places and spaces to work. Again, right, we're building new commands. So, first thing is, right, find the person, then figure out where to put them to make them the most effective. And then when they, because we're all learning together, right, when they fall down, when something happens, pick them up, dust them off, and get them ready to go again. So kind of just general commander stuff. What I focused on was building the organization, right? Again, getting the right people, and then, spend a lot of time building processes, right? And I'm not doing this alone by any means, right? I had about the best division chiefs you're ever going to ask for, and then plus, a whole other team of senior analysts, outside advisors, national agency representatives, right? We're having basically, as much help as we are brave enough to ask for, to help us set us on the right course. But if I get a new person in, it's great if they've done space work. Well, a lot of times they haven't. So they got to figure out, okay, what is it they do and how do they do it? And we had so many superstars. What you want to do is I need to build repeatable processes. I need to build something that's not dependent on this one super smart person, but that, if that person, gets another opportunity and goes somewhere else, that we're not falling down. So it was all about making sure that we had a sustainable architecture set up, so people understood what they did, where they did it, why they did it, and how they did it, so that it could be, it wasn't dependent on any single choke points. And a lot of that for me came down to working across the divisions. I could fully trust our analysis division chief to build the program that developed analysts, but I needed them to work with the collection managers. I needed them to work with the targeting shop, and I needed them to ultimately convert all of that big brain thought into planning, and then future operations. And so, I'll give you an example of that. Let's say there's, any country you can think of, right? Let's say they're doing the first on-orbit test of a new counter-space weapon system. So I'm going to go to the analysis team and also the geospatial team and a few others, and I'm going to look to them for indications and warning. I want to know what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. And then I'm going to balance that against the other thought that we have there, the other analysis available to figure out, okay, well, what does that mean? Why is this happening? What is going to happen next? As we're getting closer to the event, I'm going to work with our watch crew to make sure that we are maintaining awareness of what's happening, and most importantly, communicating that awareness to our operators, to the commander, and to our counterparts, because it's all about building and communicating space domain awareness. And then as we kind of get further along, the team they are so incredibly good, and they've got, the best support you can imagine from the national apparatus and from within the community. We know an incredible amount about what's happening in our domain, but we're never going to know everything we want. All right, there's always going to be gaps. And so we're also going to be building that collection plan at the same time so that we can start to work after that and reduce those gaps and be more knowledgeable, which ultimately will allow the commander to make better decisions. And then finally, as this all kind of is said and done and becomes less of an upcoming event and more of a this happened event, we need to integrate that into our planning, so that, we are I don't want to say predicting the future, but we are making the best possible judgment and advisements, and we understand what this one event means to operations that could happen 5 years from now. So that all involves just the divisions working together, communicating, being cooperative, being a singular team. And obviously there's a lot you want to do, and you look at any command opportunity as like, man, I wish I'd done this different or that different, but I couldn't be more proud of what the people ended up doing.
Right. No, thanks, Chris. And part of the role of the GIOC, right, is to, help Space Force and the U.S. Space Command establish space superiority, right, or have the capabilities to establish space superiority should the need arise, right. And what I'm seeing from senior leaders such as yourself and on high is kind of a broadening of the term space threat, right. We used to think of space threat as, we've got these hundreds of millions, maybe perhaps billions of dollars of satellites up there. There were these, very attractive targets because we rely on them so much, and we were very concerned about protecting them. I think as we're seeing other nations expand their use of space and do things for their joint forces that we've grown accustomed to do, that we're starting to also think about space threat in terms of what capabilities are out there that others have, China and Russia in particular, and how might they support Chinese and Russian joint operations, and what kind of a threat would that pose to our joint forces in the other domains? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, I mean, we kind of lumped together Russia and China. They're kind of on different trajectories. I'm wondering if you could talk to kind of what are you seeing out of, the Russian capability, right? Where are they at and where are they heading? And then also go into kind of where we think is the pacing threat, which I believe is China these days.
Yeah. So I actually did a little bit of anticipation of something like this. And so I did research, not much of it, but just enough. So I can talk a little bit of numbers. So I went to, for anyone that doesn't know, one of the things that we do within Space Force is we build and provide a space catalog, right? If you go to spacetrack.org, that is open, and there are a number of sites that build off of that. They use the very similar data, or they use it as their foundational piece, but it is what we communicate, or what one of the things we contribute to the broader community for the interest of safety of flight, right? We need to know what's up there, where it is, so that we can prevent collisions. Technically, we call them conjunctions, but I like collisions more because I don't have to think about what it means. Because we're all about making sure that it is a friendly neighborhood, almost an extension of the maritime commons, right? The space commons is what is mutually beneficial for all of us. So I went through the space catalog, and I just pulled numbers of what is currently on orbit. So I filtered out debris, filtered out rocket bodies, filtered out rocket bodies that create debris, because there's a lot of that. When you leave a very large fuel tank on orbit for 50 years, something's going to happen eventually. But if I look just at payloads, just at satellites, without getting to what's working and what's not, I'll look and I'll see that Russia's got about 2.5 times what China has on orbit right now. But numbers only tell you half the stories, right? So if Russia's got a little bit north of 1,550 satellites on orbit, and China's got about 630, give or take, you would start to think like, oh man, Russia's got their act together. But if I really peel back at the numbers, and when they were launched, over 60% of Russia's satellites right now on orbit were launched prior to 1990. And without, because honestly, I don't know, right? If you have anything, I don't think there's anything in my house that is, math in public, 33 years old. That just made me really sad to think that 1990 is 33 years ago, that it still works. So there's a lot of stuff up there, and I'm talking things that go back to like the old Electron and Luna series from the 60s, that you can make some logical assessment that a lot of this is just things that we never thought about deorbiting decades ago, right? It's much different now. We put something up, we generally want to have a plan to bring it down safely, so we're just not littering the atmosphere. But so you got a whole bunch of old stuff. And if I want to further skinny that down and look at, okay, in the last 10 years, right now you're talking less than 10% of what Russia has on orbit is 10 years older or less. And that's really life of a satellite. That's what you're looking for. So they got a lot of old stuff up there. There's a lot of junk up there. Now, if I contrast that to China, and just in the last 10 years, China's launched 3 times as many payloads as Russia has in that same 10-year time span. And so when I look at their overall fleet, instead of 90% of it being 10 years or older, 75% of what China's launched on orbit is 10 years or newer. So that tells me a whole bunch right then and there, because Russia had a lot. What they have now is likely much less than what it ever was. China is building, and they are building very rapidly. And there's a lot of advantage to doing things now because technology is so much different than what it was. Spacelift has gotten so much more advanced, and you're able to shrink a satellite down. So a single launch, you might have 5 or 10 or 40 plus payloads, as opposed to just one. So it's a completely different playground. But yeah, they're moving far apart. When I look to Russia, obviously the invasion of Ukraine is coming at a tremendous cost. Direct, all the things that they're losing, and then indirect, they got to buy more ammunition. They're going to have to buy more tanks. They're going to have to buy more aircraft or not. And it's up to their decision. But it's, they've got that form of indirect costs, and then sanctions are going to be, long term. I think we all understand that sanctions are going to be, just tremendously impactful. So, what limited resources they had or were able to forecast a couple of years ago, what they have from now out is going to be much different. Where I start to think about Russia and get concerned is deterrence. So the two classic deterrence capabilities that I can think of for Russia have been their nuclear forces and the Russian army. Nuclear forces aren't going anywhere, right? That's has and will be probably Russia's most significant deterrent capability. But as we look at the Russian army, and we look at, number one, the losses are, it is not what it was two and a half years ago. And also it's probably not what we thought it was. So I think the curtain has been pulled back and they've been exposed. So, what deterring value does Russia truly have? It's not the Red Army. So now you look at space and cyber. And I look at, how are they posturing space specifically to be that kind of new deterring factor? And we saw some indications of that. If I go back to about a year ago, when Russia went to the UN and they threatened the commercial enterprise, the commercial infrastructure, and essentially said, hey, if you're supporting interests counter to ours, if you're helping the Ukrainians, and I'm not quoting directly, of course, then you are subject to retaliation. And that was not an accidental statement. So that's, for Russia, they're going to have tough choices to make of, are they going to invest in updating a very aged infrastructure, or are they going to invest in the counter space capabilities that they have and bring more of them to fruition, bring more of them past the developmental stage to the fully fielded stage? And they have a very strong directed energy program. They have validated that, they launched a direct ascent anti-satellite missile, destroying one of the old 1980s SIGINT satellites. Right, that's what you can do when you got so much floating junk up in orbit. You can just use it for target practice, I guess. And so, that how they make that choice is going to be interesting. China is not really forced to make those decisions, right? China is, to me, they're relatively straightforward. I think since Desert Storm, we have communicated the U.S. way of combat operations. We've communicated the value of space, from precision navigation and timing to satellite communications, the ability to shoot, move, and communicate, right? It's kind of one of the things the U.S. has brought to the modern fight, and China paid attention, right? They're following that playbook. Now they're doing with Chinese characteristics like they do with everything, but President Xi wants a preeminent military. He understands, and the PLA and the Chinese Communist Party understands that space is a part of that, and so they're building out and they're moving in that direction. And from a resource perspective, they don't have to make those decisions on, am I going to build a space collection and space sustaining infrastructure, or am I going to build the counter space? Well, they can build it all, right? They can focus on the same electronic warfare and directed energy platforms. They've got a number of launches that have been very interesting because, if you look at any of the Shijian series, right, they are not, there are a number of uses for them, but right, I think the way they phrase that in the ICSS, in the intelligence community assessments is, right, you've got a number of technology demonstrators that have counter space potential, and how they choose to use that in the future is, I don't think we can make any assumptions there. I will use the opportunity, right? Everything that I just said is just Chris Bell's opinion. There is a tremendous number of sources that have come out and resources in the last couple of years that are truly, really different about space. Space used to be the thing that no one really talked about. It was, all the hyper classified. But if I look to to defense intelligence agencies, challenges to security in space, like second version was last year. And if I look to the to this year's IC assessment, right, these are all things that my mother could get to, or I can pull up on my phone, right? And the fact that we're communicating these things now is very impactful, because I think kind of sticking our head in the sand and just ignoring what other nations are doing is not going to it's not going to set us up for a long-term advantage.
Thanks for that rundown, Chris. And one of the things that we're seeing, especially on the Chinese side, and fully appreciate the Russian predicament that they're in, but we're seeing a lot of what I would say innovative approaches that China is taking to some of their space capabilities. They recently launched the world's first geostationary based synthetic aperture radar imaging satellite, the Luditanz 01. The fact that they threw a number on there infers that there's probably going to be a 02, a 03, who knows? So, what are you thinking that they're doing with these sorts of capabilities? This was a civil launch, right? So it's not directly associated with any sort of military aspects, but yet I'm sure it will have some sort of ramifications, or could have some military types of usage or operational support. So what do you make of some of these things like the Luditanz 01 and some of the other systems that China is currently fielding?
So geo, I always, like, okay, do I call it geostationary? Do I call it geosynchronous? I'm gonna try and stick with geosynchronous on this one, and because they do move a little bit, but it's relatively in sync with the Earth as it rotates. So geo is a fascinating orbit for a number of reasons, right? It, for some reasons when you're at it, and I know there's math involved, I just don't know it. But when you're at 36,000 kilometers, roughly, above the surface of the Earth, right, your satellite is relatively stationary. It's gonna be a little bit either above or below or right at the equator, and it might do a pattern up and down, but it's gonna stare. But the problem is it's so far away. So if I look at an imager in geo, it's so counterintuitive, but it also has very interesting implications. So first is like anyone who's ever held a camera understands that, the closer you are to the objective that you're taking a picture of, you're gonna get a better picture, right? I used to go fishing in Alaska, and, I can't remember if it was like, if it was the Kenai River or around Talkeetna, but, I'd see a bear way far away. And I wanted to keep it far away, but I wanted the picture of it. So I'd try and take a picture and I get nothing. I get trees and a little brown dot. But when so if I just understand that, far away equals, well, let me break it down. We'll go to math here. So if I'm going to look at, just kind of rough orbitology, if I'm talking low Earth orbit, really you're talking from minimum sustainable on over 100 kilometers up to 2,000 is the kind of the break point before you get to medium Earth. So on average, let's just go with 500 kilometers. So if I'm trying to take a picture of something from 500 kilometers away versus 36,000 kilometers away, or 3 times the diameter of the Earth, when I'm now at geo with an imager, I'm going to get something that has a much bigger footprint, roughly about 1/3 the size of the Earth's surface. So it's going to have access to view a whole bunch of stuff, right? And now the size of the image is not going to be the full third. It's going to be based on apertures and processing and a whole bunch of other factors. But it's going to, its field of view, its footprint is huge. Can't really hide from it. But the trade-off of that is as I get further away, just like I couldn't take a picture of the bear because I didn't want to get eaten by it, and get closer, right? Your resolution is not going to be good. We've seen a million examples of low Earth imagers. And, right, the thing I'm always looking for is, can I break out a sunroof on this? Can I see a car, first of all, and then can I, discern the front windshield, the back windshield, and the sunroof? If so, I know I got a resolution of about, about 0.5 meters. But you're not going to get that with something that far away, even with the best artificial enhancements, right? It's going to be something to the effect of, I can break out a building, maybe like a big building. But what you get is now you trade accuracy, fidelity for broad awareness. And the last thing you get with geo is, as I kind of previously mentioned, that staring capability. I'm gonna hover like the unblinking eye of Sauron over here, and I'm gonna focus on this area, right? in low Earth orbit. The satellites are moving around with a periodicity of about 95 minutes. So, I'm going to take a picture here, and I'm moving around, orbiting. The Earth is rotating, and I'm not going to have the opportunity to take that other picture for a couple more days, unless I build a lot more LEO satellites, which is why China has so many of them. So they have repeat access to targets. But so if I combine all these things together, I can take a low resolution picture at whenever I want from a wide area, and that's interesting. Now it gets really interesting if you trade out an electro-optical sensor for a synthetic aperture radar image, and now I can take that picture day or night, and I can take it through clouds. Clouds don't affect star imaging. So, what are the uses of that? Well, if I want to find something really big, let's say like the size of a big building in a wide open area, this is how I do it, right? This is the system I need to find something that I'd have no idea where it could be. But that's just capability, right? We talk about Intel generally in a task, collect, exploit, process. Task, collect, process, exploit, disseminate, flow. And I can collect all day long. How I exploit it and how I process it is what really matters. So what you have to have is some sort of an automation built into this that can go through and instead of having a person or a room of people look, scan, okay, where is it, right? This is not rocket surgery to have a computer in the middle that identifies things like, hey, analysts, take a look at this, and then verify. Once you can do that, once you can combine advanced collection, big data analysis, and basic processing, now you've got something that can be delivered faster, which the way I've always labeled that is decision quality intelligence, and that is ultimately what we use to feed kill chains. So it's a fascinating, in terms of a concept, it's a fascinating concept.
Thanks, Chris. And I just want to thank you for your time today. It's been great talking to you again, and thanks for all of your insights and for your continued support to the U.S. Space Force. Best wishes to you and your family, and thank you for all of your service. Semper Supra.
All right, thank you, thanks, Greg, and same to you.
Oh, no worries. And just a reminder for all the Space Force Association members out there, we've got a Space Power Conference that's coming up in Orlando, Florida from December 11th through the 13th. So please be sure to register to make sure that you have a seat there at that very important conference that's upcoming. Again, Chris, Colonel Bell, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you around.
Yes, sir.
All right.
There are 8 billion humans on Earth. The Space Force Association is bringing over 2,000 of them together, all with the common goal of preserving and protecting our thriving space domain. The most critical space power challenges will be addressed. This is your invitation to be part of the solution. Attend the Space Power Conference and help secure our nation's legacy in the stars.